Good morning, everyone. I'm Shotade Olusegun. In today's video, I want us to dissect the invention of time technology. Now, why is it called time technology? We're going to delve deep into it in a moment. Well, the first thing that I want us to look at, uh, how quantum events or actions are related to the classical action while object of a classical while a classical object is in motion. And with that, we're going to model we're actually going to base the explanation on the time energy wave model. Okay, so now let's look at a situation where we have maybe a tennis ball, and that tennis ball is being kicked. Now, once that tennis ball is kicked, what will now happen will be that the action will start from the past, then through the present into the future. And so, if we now look at the how the ball will actually go, like the trajectory of the ball, it will be lifted from the ground, and as it goes, as it travels in the air, then it will accumulate mass. So we can see the actions right here, the trajectory. So the ball will be lifted from the ground. So basically, we need to really understand that the ball is at equilibrium. It's really at the evolutionary uh, point. But kicking the ball at that instance, that moment is the present, which is now. But basically, we see that the action commences from or starts from the evolutionary singularity. So it's more, and you can see that that is the reason that we have the formula of everything using the classical mass worth to get the counterpart at quantum level. So we need to move from the classical, and if we look at the past, present, future, the way it is portrayed at the present, we have combination of the past and the future as the now that we have, but it is instant, constant, which is the line that we have right here. Now, when you look at it, the past portion of the now that we have is the classical portion, which is the classical realm, while the future is the quantum realm. So I'm going to use that to explain the whole situation quite all right. Now, when we look at the ball is being kicked, it will move from the past phase through the present into the future phase. So now, the ball, as it's been lifted up into the air, it will accumulate mass as the introduced energy, the energy that is introduced by kicking the ball, will be converted to what is known as energy density right here. And then the energy density will be decaying as the trajectory of the quantum counterpart of the ball is going inversely relative to the classical ball, which is traveling upward in the air. So now, what is the implication of that? The implication of that is that as the inherent particles of the ball, as they are traveling inversely to the classical ball, they will be approaching the low energy state, which is this region. Now, what we have there is that as the ball is being kicked, then there is introduction of energy, which has increased the intensity of the particles. So the particles will be vibrating so rapidly, and as a result of that, it is synonymous to what we have in the second law of thermodynamics, which which is entropy. So now the energy will have to dissipate itself. to other particles that are surrounding the ball. So in this case, we could have it as air molecule or whatever it is. So it will be dissipated to them, and as it's dissipating the energy, then that will be causing the expansion of the time energy wave interaction as we have it here. So in that case, it will be dissipating the energy, and as it's dissipating that, then it will be moving from highly vibrated particles to low vibrated particles. And what that is telling us is actually pointing to mass convergence. Now this this action is synonymous to a situation where you have two canoes right by each other. If you have them on the water right by each other, so if there is a mass in one canoe and maybe somebody in that canoe now carry the mass, something that is heavy, and throw it inside the other canoe, you will see that the momentum of the two canoes will be inversely away from each other. The two canoes will now have to shift inversely away from each other. That is what we have right here. And as we have time scaling, which is time dilated formation to length contraction, as we have that, then that means that we have transportation of mass right from the quantum operation to the classical trajectory. And then that formation is what that transmission of mass or transportation of mass is what will now cause what is known as momentum. So motion, it could be defined as relativity of mass gain to mass loss. So it could be defined as such. Now, this definition that we have for motion is the same thing that we have for information, but we're going to actually refine that so that it will, serve the purpose of what we want to achieve. So now that we understand that the momentum will actually start from the past, and in the past phase, there will be accumulation of mass, and that will now serve as weight gain it will serve as relativistic scaling of time of weight gain formation to light weight formation, and that defines the momentum. It defines the motion. So when it gets to the present phase, it will now become instant because it's a point of transition. That is the point where the momentum has reached the maximum point, which is the peak of the trajectory. And then from the present to the future, then the momentum will be moving downward, which means that the additional weight that is being given to the ball will now be decaying. So the mass what will now be decaying as it moves towards the future. Now, that ball, this future phase is synonymous to somebody being in a lift, and if that lift is accelerating, the person inside the lift will actually feel the weightlessness of his own body, because the velocity of the lift will actually cause the person to be light. And it is this relativity of lightness to the weight to heaviness that usually cause what is it called momentum. And so now in this phase, we now have decaying, which is decaying of mass, which is what we have here. Now the mass, classical mass, is being so formed right at the present, which is the now of the trajectory. And so for that mass to now decay, then the transmission from the classical realm to quantum realm must be more than the speed of light, which is it's going to be instant. And being instant means that the trajectory will travel beyond the time energy wave model as we have in the application of formula of everything. So it is when it travels beyond the constraint of time energy wave model that the quantum mass worth, the original quantum mass worth, can be retrieved. And once we have that, that will be injected back into the system to cause what is known as energy, to cause what is known as energization, or yes, let me say energization of energy. So it will, the value, the excess value uh, will be forced inside a small space at quantum level, and that will actually energize the momentum, because this fixed point is known as stable fixed point. Why this fixed point is unstable fixed point? So mass can actually travel downward without any external force, but at this point there must be an external force that will accelerate the particle from this stable fixed point towards the singularity of the future. And so the excess that we have in that small space at quantum level will cause the accelerated momentum towards the singularity. Now as energy is increasing relative to narrow scaling of time, which is time will be scaling low, and as time is shrinking, as time is becoming narrow, then energy will be increasing, and that is what is known as entropy. So now that energy will be increasing till it gets to the singularity of the future. So I want to use a scenario to better explain this. Let's say there is a car, and that car is traveling at a full speed. If that car is actually traveling through a downward slope path, if you want to make that car stop, you will not just press the brake and hold the brake down for the car to stop, because the car is moving so fast. So for you to make that car to stop, then you have to be applying the brake intermittently, to be introducing the what is known as chunk of, or to be introducing what we can call quantized energy worth that can actually slow down the car. And it is this area, this portion, that we have that notion of quantized energy at quantum level, because we need to get constant energy worth, introduction of constant mass worth to make that car stop. You understand? And so the quantized mass worth that is being supplied will actually be transformed to radiation as particles are traveling towards the low energy state. And that, as it travels into the dilated time area, it will be converted to mass worth, which will be what classical energy we obtain, we assimilate to form the mass worth of the classical trajectory. Good. That is for this portion. This area, this past portion, to slow down the acceleration And when you are trying to slow down the acceleration, you have to apply brake. And by applying the brake at top speed, you will have to quantize the amount of brake that you supply to make the car stop. And so we can see that we now have the constancy of classical gravity here, because you know that when gravity is actually applying on, when you apply gravity on object, it will be the same irrespective of the uh, weight or the size of those objects. So we see that here. Now here, what do we say? For these particles, or for this organized particle to travel towards the singularity of the future, then we need to apply continuous and constant acceleration to energize it towards the singularity, and that will actually decay the mass worth of the classical trajectory, or the mass worth of the classical mass. And in the process of that, we will have a constant, which is uniform momentum. So we're going to have uniform momentum here as we have uniform momentum here. But here we apply brake, while we apply accelerator here. Now, if I'm to liken this to a scenario, let's say we have a very heavy object on a plank that is uh, that is uh, that is moving that is moving downward. We have a heavy ball on a slanted plank that is, moving downward, that is pointing downward. So if we have that heavy object, and also we have a balloon which is light, if we should place two of them at the top of the plank here, and we release them, we'll see that the heavy object will travel faster than the balloon. So the essence of getting rid of the mass worth at classical level is to maintain that uniform momentum. Good. Now that we have uh, that, so I want to talk about what is known as information. Now, information, the way I will define it will be, information is the relativity of a weight concentrated formation to less weight concentrated formation. Or let me say, information is the relativity of weight gain to weight loss. Now, when you have a set of particles that are light being arranged in a particular place relative to another set of particles which are heavy, organized at other point or at other side, then you are said to have information. When we look at the Maxwell's monster, Maxwell said that if there is a monster that is on two boxes that are very near to each other, that if that monster could know the difference or the speed difference factor of the particles in the two boxes, like probably the air molecule, if that monster could know the speed difference factor between the traveling particles or molecules, air molecules, then the monster can actually arrange or rearrange the molecules of the particles in such a way that we will have particles that are moving slowly in one box and other particles moving so fast in other box. And what we have in that kind of scenario is more or less like having an oven. immediately by the side of a fridge. So if you can arrange information such that you arrange information by their uh, by the speed difference factor, then you get information. So in that thought experiment, they said what that monster needed was to just know information about how fast the particles are moving and how slowly the particles are moving. But that is not true. For you to have understanding of a clear picture of a particle moving so fastly or that is so fast, then you will have to travel beyond the speed of that particle. So definitely the monster is using energy in arranging the fast moving particles and the slow moving particles. So in this case, in our own case, time is what we can actually use to rearrange information such that we will have order in a disorderly uh, formation. So basically that is why this is called the invention of time technology. So now we have seen the possibility of time traveling beyond, even far beyond the speed of light by applying formula of everything. We know that when we apply formula of everything, the trajectory of getting the quantum counterpart, which is the electron mass, is far beyond the limit that light can travel. Now, the speed of light is being represented by the uniform trajectory at classical level and uniform trajectory at quantum level. And this instant trajectory is far, because it is instant by nature. It is far beyond what light can withstand. And for that reason, we have the speed of time being faster than the speed of light. Then what is the essence of time being faster than the speed of light? If we have a bird, and if the wings of the bird are being fluttered, well, if we have a camera that is not as fast as the speed of the fluttering effect of the wings, then the camera will not be able to capture detailed information about the fluttering wings. So what we will have will just be like a cloud of the wings, which is synonymous to electron. But the moment we are able to get a camera that has speed, the frame speed that is higher than the speed of that bird, that is higher than the speed of the fluttering effect of the wings, then we'll see that the fluttering effect will now serve as a slow motion, such that we'll be able to see the position of that wing in time and in space. So that is the essence of time being able to travel faster than the speed of light, because with that we'll be able to get the actual mass worth of electron. And the essence of getting the actual mass worth of electron is for us to later energize at this fixed point, which is the stable fixed point, to energize energy such that energy will be able to accelerate towards the singularity of the future. Good. So now, information, we now know that information is the organization of light weight particles relative to organized heavyweight particles. So what do we mean by that? Now, when you look at the emanation, when we look at the emanation of information technology, we see that the first invention is what is known as punched card. Punched card. Now, this punched card, we have a couple of small zeros being the punches. for the card. And those zeros are being arranged in such a way to draw. They are being arranged in such a way to draw or to design. We can use that kind of technology to draw anything. We can use punch card to draw even entire human being. We can use that punch card to write whatever text we might want to write. So if we now want to relate the punching of the card to what we define information to be, that would be that the punched area relative to the unpunched area will give us the clear picture of what is being drawn, and that is information for you. And if we want to liken information to computer, then we're going to liken that to on or off, which is the binary format that computer is using, which is 1 or 0. And this 1 or 0 that we have is just the structural architecture of an instance of a computer. So instance is the memory of a computer. So 1 zeros represent the memory structure of a computer. And so once we have the highly intensified energy, which is illumination of light, that could be likened to a punched portion on the card. So that is the same thing as 1. So once we now have a low energy state, or we do not have energy at all, we can liken that to the 0 portion of the binary number, while that on the punch card will be the unpunched area of the card. So that is how we can actually visually represent information. And once we have that, we don't need to we are not being restricted to anything. We can use that to do many things. But when we now look at the binary, you see that for the binary we have discrete nature of wave, which is we either have 1 or 0. But if we look at the punch card, they use circle. They punch the card, and the format of the punch is in circle, and that shows the analog nature of that punch card, because the circle is being evened out, and so it is smooth. So if we are to actually relate that to binary format of the computer, we will see that information for digital signals are not being fully captured, in the sense that the analog has smooth transition from that defined state and undefined state. So what I'm trying to say is that when you look at the pixels of a television, the pixels, when it is being arranged aggregately, we have a clear picture of what is on the screen. But if you zoom in on that image to the point that you get to the quantum level, you see that that information will now become blurry. Not only will it be blurry, it will also be in form of square, and it will not be clear. That is as a result of the fact that the signal is discrete in nature. So that may not fully represent what information time energy wave model is trying to portray. So for us to have a kind of information that time energy wave interaction or model is portraying, we have to go back to analog. And that's why I said in that my published book on Amazon, which is the Invention of Time Technology, I said digital signal will be converted to analog signal. So time technology can use the combination of digital signal and analog signal, but it will use more of analog signal than digital signal. Now, what do I mean by that? For instance, we know that every action that takes place in the universe, every action that takes place in the universe, they move from the past to the future. And even we ourselves, we can see that intricacy or the inherent nature of the past and the future in our now, which is our current being. Like, if you go, if you just, if you want to know that, you can get to know that by just appearing before a mirror. If you appear before a mirror, or you just appear before a pond, when you look into the pond, you will see a copy of yourself inside the water. What you see is an inverted copy of yourself. And when you look at how that is being inverted, you see it is from you will be from left to right, while that inverted will be from right to left. So when you are looking at that inverted image, it is clear, and that is, you are looking at your future, and that your future is not the same thing as yourself, the way you have it, because the future that you see inside the pond will be light compared to your real self. Same thing if you look into the mirror, the inverted version of yourself that you see will be light compared to your real self. So we have that intricacy of the past and the future in our now, and that is why when you introduce energy into a particle or into any object at the present phase, the trajectory will be from the past to the future. Good. Now we can see a typical example of that in our solar system. Sun, for instance, the surface of sun is more solid, it's more wavy than the solar corona. The solar corona has a temperature of over 1,000,000 degrees Celsius, while the surface of the sun itself has just about 5,800 degrees Celsius. And then the surface of the sun is hotter, but the difference we have there is that the particles in that solar corona, they are vibrating more aggressively than the particles in the surface of the sun. And that is where the temperature is different from it. Now, we see that the density of the solar corona is not as much. The energy density of solar corona is not as much as that of the surface of the sun. So the sun will produce more heat than the solar corona. So temperature deals with how the particles are vibrating, the intensity of the particles vibration, while the heat refers to total energy that a particle can transfer at a point in time, and that has to do with density, energy density. That is how particles are being concentrated in a given area or in a volume of space. That is that. So what is the essence of having the solar corona to the surface of the sun? When you see the solar corona, you see that it is momentum. Or how should I put it? Let me say solar corona is flexible, so light compared to the surface of the sun. And so you must have, just as we have for the motion, when we're defining motion, you must have something that is more solid to what is light to have momentum. And that is the essence of that solar corona to the surface of the sun. Good. So now, when I want to explain information more. To explain information more, there are some things happening from the past phase to the future phase. Now, the past phase, at that region, energy is timed. In the past, energy is timed. Then when energy is timed, then you can have convergence of mass. Because what that is telling you is that you have more spacious room to what is occupied. And if you look at the formula of everything, what that is telling us is that the T, the M is telling us that what change of time do we have in relation to changes in mass. So the time changes will always be more than the changes in mass. And as a result of that, we always have enough room to accommodate whatever mass that is being created. And so having such room, we acquire accumulation of mass. And that is why we have at this region, energy is timed. At that past phase, energy is timed. Now, what is the implication of that? When energy is timed, then the events of that can be formed. The event of that past phase can be formed in such a way that it will be visible to human eyes. But when we now move from the past to the future, we now have another scenario in which energy is energized. When energy is energized, then the space will be so narrow to accommodate event in such a way that such event will now be visible to human eyes. So that is what we have at quantum level, and it is that reason that it is difficult for us to see the momentum of particle at quantum level. So in the future, energy is energized, and when energy is energized, then we have that decaying of mass, and so the information we have here is light relative to the information of the past. Then another scenario that we may also have, that is time is energized. When we have time is energized scenario, that simply means that we are in the realm of ageless reality. So when time is energized, we are in the realm of ageless reality. Now, time technology is actually going to use 4 sets of numbers. Now, what time technology is trying to do is to model the universe exactly the way it is. Now, when we look at the universe, we see that we have expanding phase and then we have contracting phase. Instead of having on or off, or having punched or not punched, or having instead of having on or off, or punched or not punched, we are having expanding and contracting, or we are having opening and closing. But opening in this sense is not a kind of opening that is being disconnected to open. It's more or less like expansion and contraction. So that is what the time technology is trying to model. Now, we want to actually have information the way they are, such that at quantum level we can have a clarity of projected information, unlike in the digital computing world. So now the four set of numbers that we'll need will be 0 positive or 0 plus. 0 plus will serve as evolutionary singularity. because that singularity is the generating singularity from which we have particles that could be accelerated, and then particles that could converge and form mass. So that is going to be zero positive value. Now, the moment those particles now travel inversely in order to accumulate more mass, but in this case we are in momentum phase. So instead of accumulating mass, it accumulates energy density. So when we now get the energy density at classical level to quantum level, then it collapses. The trajectory of classical and that of the quantum will collapse. And once they collapse, we have one positive and then one negative. That could serve as this charge value relative to each other. So one positive, one negative. Then as it travels towards the singularity of the future, then we're going to have zero negative. Now we have two types of zero. We have zero positive and zero negative. Now don't forget that at the minimum and the maximum point of time energy wave interaction at the present phase, we also have zero negative, then zero negative. Because zero negative will be the one to attract, while zero positive will be the one to disperse. It will disperse, it will dissipate energy, while the zero negative will accommodate energy. So out of these four sets of numbers that we need for time technology, we already have one negative, we already have one positive, we have zero positive. The only value that is left for us to get is the zero negative. Once we have zero negative, then we can venture into time technology. Then another thing that is worthy of mentioning is 369. 369, that is the number that Nikola Tesla said we need to actually study in order to know the reality of the universe. In his own words, he said that we should think in terms of vibration, energy, and in terms of vibration, energy, and what is it? There are three things, but basically for me, I changed that to we should think in terms of worth, reality, and energy. What do I mean by that? The past phase represents the worth. So the worth, the trajectory of the worth are actually moving towards the present phase. And the present phase is the reality phase, where everything is instant. And that is the transiting point between the past and the future. So the present is the phase of reality, and then the future is the phase of energy, and we have seen that already. So we can have this kind of icon for 369, where you have the 0 of 9 being stacked on the 0 of 6. So 6 is pointing towards the future, while the 9 is pointing to the past, and that 3 is the connector that will actually transport energy from the past into the future, or energy from the future into the past. Now, why do we have 3 right there? The 3 is actually pointing to the low energy state of the position phase, and then low energy state of momentum phase. The low energy state, the two low energy states, are the states of reality, because it is the state where we have to travel beyond the constant of time energy wave model to get the actual mass worth. And also here too, same thing will happen. So in order for us to have the cyclic formation of infinity, which is, when you look at this diagram now, it serves as it serves as infinity. For us to have the complete circle of that infinity, then 3 is the ideal value. 3 is the ideal value. Now, when we look at this diagram, we see that when we travel beyond the limit of time energy wave model, we get the actual value of electron mass. What is that telling us? We know that when a kicked ball, in this case tennis ball, when it is being kicked and it travels from the past into the future, when it drops on the ground, it then regains its total mass worth. And so when we pick the ball on the ground, we have, but the question now is, the mass worth of the ball that we have, is it the same thing as what it was before the kicking of the ball? That is the question we should ask ourselves. Now, by applying formula of everything, we have seen that when you get the actual electron mass, and then you use that actual electron mass to get the counter classical mass, which is 2,277,250,000 kilograms. When you get this mass worth, if you now supply this classical mass worth inside the formula of everything to reconfirm the quantum mass worth, you will discover that the quantum mass worth will have been increased by the value of -1. So instead of having 9.109 times 10 raised power minus 31 kilogram, you will have 9.109 times 10 raised power minus 32. Now, mass accumulation is dynamic, and that is synonymous to what we have in real life. For instance, when we go through the phase, when we go through that momentum phase, at times there could be a possibility of losing weight or gaining to weight. That is it. So we may gain weight and then we may lose weight. So that is actually synonymous, and what that is telling us is that quantum level mass has effect at classical level. Though we know that as mass is being more converged, then the feature of quantum mechanics will be withdrawn or will be removed. So the feature of quantum mechanics will not have effect at quantum level, as we have